Hi, the last region of the world we're going to talk about is Australia and Oceania. You can see how far extends this region, with the main areas being Australia, New Zealand. We've got a major portion here of the country of Papua New Guinea, but for the most part, it's spread over thousands of miles in the Pacific Ocean, to include the Hawaiian Islands in the United States. So Oceania is a sweeping collection of islands reaching from New Guinea and New Zealand all the way up to Hawaii. A little bit of political unrest in Fiji, but this region is mainly dominated by Australia and New Zealand. Australia has a population of about 24 million, New Zealand almost 5 million. The outback, we have heard that term before, is Australia's thinly settled, huge, dry interior. And Australia is about the same size as the United States, with almost 10 times less the population. We have Polynesia, which stands for many islands, consisting of a number of different island groups. Tonga, Samoa, which we'll talk about, Society Islands. We have New Zealand's Maori. They possess the Polynesian cultural traits, much like the Aboriginal people of Australia. The First Nations, or the original people of New Zealand. It's got a unique physical setting. There's been different responses to the indigenous people as they work to coexist with the colonial powers, mainly of England in this particular area here. And it's got a youthful political geography, meaning a lot of these countries, like your sub-Saharan Africa, are all fairly new. Other issues that pose this area at risk include global resource pressures, such as mining operations in the country of Nauru, as well as New Caledonia. You can see what Nauru looks like here, and you can see the center of this country, and you can see how big it is. It's relatively small. The center of the country literally being obliterated from mining, and in this case, phosphate. There's also issues of global warming and rising sea levels. A lot of these are low-lying countries, and also a history of testing, especially with the United States and French nuclear testing in the area in Marshall Islands and French Polynesia. So you can see some of the areas. Desertification, this is what we refer to as the outback. This is New Zealand, but we have a large country here where it belongs to France called New Caledonia. Right here we've got Fiji, Samoa, we'll talk about those later. Kiribati, which is a very, very small, large island group spread over a large area, but relatively small islands. And you can see an example here. Other things, the loss of biodiversity, the Great Barrier Reef, which is off the coast of Australia, and something that you can even see from space. So we have the Great Barrier Reef off the coast of Australia. Here's some kind of pictures of it here from my Google Earth. But we have Australia, northern coast of Australia, and you can see bits and pieces here of the Great Barrier Reef, or some of the islands sometimes when it is above sea level. And then tsunami hazards, Volcanic Islands. In 2018, the big island of Hawaii going through a lot of issues due to the geologic hotspot and the formation of these islands. And these actual island chains run out along this hot spot through the Pacific Ocean. Some of these are seamounts, which don't go above the surface of the water. Other of these do. Exotic zoology, right? Number of different marsupials in Australia because of its relative isolation. And then New Zealand. It's got a varied landscape, and it's actually made of two islands. We have a North Island and then a South Island. And the South Island is geologically active. We have volcanoes, and you can see what they look like here. Okay. The South Island is much less populated. You can see the climate regimes. So you can see New Zealand is our seas, Australia is our seas, because they are a little bit further from the equator. And our outback is which makes up a large portion of it, is going to be your dry climates. We've got ocean landforms, so we have these volcanic islands, and the whole idea of lagoons and atolls. You can see the formation of those as these volcanoes in the middle erode, and then what we have left over. So contemporary populations, Australia has one of the highest urban populations in the world. And then it talks about some of the settlement patterns, movement to New Caledonia, the Fiji Islands, Samoa, and then Micronesia, and then even Easter Island, going over towards Chile. Okay? And you can see just how stark some of these are. There's tiny little islands situated throughout here. So I can type in the word Easter Island, which belongs to Chile all the way over here. So the relative isolation of it through here. There's another one here called Pitcairn. Pitcairn Islands. Okay, if we were to zoom in on my satellite image, this one here, you zoom in enough, there's actually homes and houses right here. So you can imagine some of the resource issues attached to that, but we zoom out to see where these are, and these are hundreds of miles from anything. So the relative isolation, and as you can imagine, get a better appreciation for the movement and settlement of this region, which was a lot different than what we have in North America, South America, Europe, Sub-Saharan Africa. And so you can see the movement here throughout this particular area. And we're looking at Pitcairn. Pitcairn's off over here, and Easter Island is even further to the east. We look at population densities, your major places of population density. On the eastern coast here, Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, over to Adelaide. And then we got Canberra, which is the capital. We have densely populated Nauru that we looked at before. Around the skirt of the island here. And we zoom out and you can see where it is, the Marshall Islands, Solomon Sea, out near Papua New Guinea. And then the whole idea of urban transformation, especially with Australia and New Zealand, it has strong North American and European influences. But there's been Dutch in New Zealand since the 1600s, and more so British more recently, the U.S. into Hawaii, a number of other places too. You can see Sydney, Australia with the famed Opera House. This is still Australia. There's Aboriginal footprints. Aboriginal are the indigenous peoples of Australia. And then immigration from the English and Irish and others. And then some of the immigration issues that Australia and other countries still deal with. And then some of the languages that we have there. And you can see the colonial history attached to it. And so, like we showed before, wide array of different cultures. They're separated by large distances, so they have the ability to form there. So we can see some French nuclear testing here. Unrest in Fiji, an island nation here. We've got New Zealand. The indigenous people, the Maori and the Aboriginal people in Australia and New Zealand. We have this set of islands here, Papua New Guinea, New Caledonia, which belongs to France. And other independent countries, U.S. possessions. We have one here, American Samoa. I thought this one was kind of interesting because there's a Samoa and there's an American Samoa. zoom in right here. We have this little line. I don't think anyone noticed it, but that's the international date line. So America Samoa, I think it's about 6 hours behind us. Right across the way, right across the strait is the actual country of Samoa. So this is owned by the U.S. or run by the United States. This is a separate country. But America Samoa is a day behind Samoa. So I thought it was kind of interesting. So if today is Tuesday at 1 o'clock in Samoa, it is Wednesday at 1 o'clock, or in American Samoa, it's 1 day ahead in Samoa. And a lot of this is because if we were to zoom out, we can see the international date line, which coincides pretty much with 180 degrees west longitude. If we travel from east to west, we gain a day. We travel from west to east, we lose a day. But large region was that Samoa wanted to be on the same time as New Zealand, the same relative time as New Zealand, which is, I think, 15, 16 hours ahead of us in the Eastern time zone. I think it's 15 hours. Where that American Samoa, they wanted them to be on the same relative time zone with Hawaii, Alaska, and the rest of the United States. So I believe they are 6 hours behind the Eastern time zone and 3 hours behind California. So that's a really interesting. And then you can see how the international date line kind of includes this island country right here of Kiribati. And this date line was actually changed in 1990 or so that this nation of Kiribati wasn't split between two different days. Okay? In the continental United States, we're split between 4 different time zones. Imagine being split between 2 different days. So those are some of the issues that they deal with over there. And so you can see American Samoa here, and then you can see Samoa, the actual country of Samoa here. We've got Fiji, Tonga, and the Cook Islands, and some of these owned by New Zealand, United States, France. So very interesting dynamic. Talks about economy, economic challenges with a lot of these places. For the most part, places like French Polynesia and Tahiti have benefited from tourism, while others haven't. And you can just see the relationships Australia and New Zealand have with some of these local larger areas, the imports and exports. And then social challenges. Quality of life, Human Development Index, extremely high in Australia and New Zealand. Lower in places like Papua New Guinea, Solomon Islands. And that's about it for Australia and Oceania.